get talking now as we look at Nigeria's economy and 2023 election now, outlook for growth in the first quarter of 2023. And of course, we're also going to be looking at, the impact of the current economic crisis. One is the Naira crunch and, of course, the fuel crisis out there. How is that likely to impact the performance of the economy in the first quarter and, of course, going forward, vis-a-vis some economic policies expected of the incoming administration? So let's get talking now. Vayala Kwaga, senior analyst at Budget Foundation. He joins us now. Thank you for your time. We'll appreciate you.
Hi, Frank. Thank you all, as always, for having me.
Yeah, I think it's the first time, you're appearing since the year started. So it's good to see you again. And then I'm sure you're following development in the economy. Yes, of course. I know you're watching keenly what is happening. So first, let's start from, the election. Yes, and how that is connected to economy. So some people say, look, there's no way you don't have uncertainties when you are in an election year. But do we have, can you say, if you are to assess the feelings we're getting in the economy, what do you think is the impact of this election is on the economy? And how significant is the impact of the 2023 presidential election on the economy so far?
Thank you so much for having me, Frank. And yes, this is the first time I'm appearing this year, and it's great to be here.
Yeah.
I would start off by saying that it's difficult to measure the impact of an election that was preceded by a series of macroeconomic shocks. So we already had problems in the oil sector. We were producing far below our, average output. I think just recently we climbed back to 1.26 million barrels, per day, and this is less than the 1.69 that is our average, and of course far less than the OPEC average of 1.8 million barrels. So our chief revenue earner had been, in the doldrums. And this is going to be very significant for the intended revenue that the federal government aims to meet for this year, which is around about a little over 10 trillion, thereabouts.
Right.
And it's really interesting because, you had inflation as well, which was rising to nearly 22%. You had unemployment. The NBS hadn't come out with any recent figures since its last publishing.
Okay.
But you had these problems, subsist. You had the Naira redesign, you had fuel scarcity.
Okay, just a moment, just a quick one before you talk about the Naira redesign and, of course, the fuel scarcity. Let's quickly take a break. When we return, you start from that note, right?
Okay,
So,
that's fine.
yes, so we'll take a moment. We're back. Please stay with us. So we have Vayala Kwaga back now. Thank you for saying that. So yes, we were about touching up on the Naira scarcity and, of course, the fuel scarcity as well. Talk to us about that.
Yes, so these are problems that have persisted and problems that have no small impact on governance, on revenue collection, and even on expenditure. So when you hear analysts say that, the elections may not have much of an impact, I really wonder how they're able to measure that. These are problems that may even persist after the elections have been concluded and after the president-elect, whoever he shall be at that point, is sworn in. So I would say, authoritatively that on a scale of 1 to 10, these issues, these problems, these states of distress have a significant 9 to 10%, impact on the economy. And then the elections, considerably are an indication of likely policy direction. So you have international observers also keenly watching, and whoever will be whoever will be Nigeria's president, whoever that person is, already will send signals to the international community and investors on whether or not, they should pitch their financial tents in the country.
Now that you mentioned the issue of president and I mean the outcome of the election, yes, we have president-elect in waiting, no doubt about that. But the litigations, it's ongoing. We saw that both top political parties, their candidate went to court. Peter Obi went to court. We also have, Atiku Abubakar hitting the courtroom as well. So what kind of, feelings does it send to the international community, especially the business community and investors? And how significant will the impact be when it comes to attracting foreign investment, and of course, boosting investors' confidence?
I mean, it's going to be impactful, in no small way. I mean, take a look at Fitch, the credit ratings agency, which downgraded Nigeria's rating from a B to a B minus. And this was based off of signals that had emerged as at late 2022. In 2023, since then, this is March, numerous things have happened, and it would not be surprising for a ratings agency to further downgrade Nigeria. I think Moody's also downgraded Nigeria by a few or a couple of points, making our rating much lower. And this, without a doubt, would be a cause for concern in the minds of investors. So you are looking at what may likely be a protracted legal battle. And this is because it was a three-horse race in many ways. The election was a three-horse race between, the incumbent party, a resilient second force, which was PDP, 16 years of PDP, and then, the relatively dark horse of the Labour Party, which carried the sentiments of a large class of the youth of Nigeria. And from what we see in the news, there will be an attempt, to ensure that this matter is settled finally at the courts. However, governance will continue. We still have a president. We still have a commander-in-chief. We still have a budget. We still have an accountant general, and those disbursements will continue to come out. I don't know if our viewers recall that the president, expanded the size of the budget, keeping in place some key allocations for the victims of flooding. And why I mention this is the budget I'm referring to is actually 2022 budget. And it was meant to continue to subsist 3 months or about 90 days after the end of the 2022 fiscal year. So in reality, we are still implementing 2022 budget policies, for those of us that may not be aware. So there's even a very small window for the 2023 proper fiscal and, of course, monetary policy to be implemented. So we are watching, very, very attentively. And I'm sure I, as well as millions of Nigerians, do hope for a swift end to the legal tussle so that, business can go on as usual.
Well, interesting. But let's look. Do you think that we should start predicting the outcome of the first quarter in terms of GDP growth with what you've explained, the Naira crunch, scarcity, fuel scarcity, and all of that? So do you think that will have, significant impact in how the first quarter GDP turns out?
Yeah, I think it will have an impact. I mean, let's take a look at inflation, for instance. And why I want to create a foundation is because, you cannot view macroeconomic issues in isolation. You can measure them, I suppose, academically in isolation. But when you are looking at the impact on the ground, the impact on the lives of citizens, it has to be, with a multidimensional perspective. So we had inflation that was around 21.34% in December, climbing to 21.89% in January of 2022. I don't think February figures are out yet. And if you look at some of the components, what are the key components that brought about an increase in the inflation rate, the consumer price index, if you will, bread and cereal, actual and imputed rent, potatoes, yam and tubers, vegetables and meat. These were the things that brought about a rise in the inflation rate. And you need to ask yourself, so what does this mean for people who are conveying these goods? And, how does this play in tandem with fuel scarcity? Let's take a look at, state by state. On a month-to-month basis, food inflation was highest in Lagos, Ogun, and Ekiti. So you have a concentration of high inflation in the southwestern part of the country. Interestingly, it was lowest in Yobe, Jigawa, and Kebbi, two opposite ends of the northern region of the country. Taking a look at unemployment, though we do not have official figures.
Hello. Yeah, hello, Viola. I guess we're having a distortion with the audio connection there, but I think the interesting what the point you've making. Okay, great. I'm aware you're back, so please continue.
Yes, and I mean, we're also looking at unemployment, which some analysts, I think the International Labour Organization, projects Nigeria's unemployment to reach somewhere around 45%. I mean, that is a terrifying thought. Looking at gross domestic product, there has been a very optimistic stance by the federal government that GDP will rise to around 3.7%. IMF says more like 3.1. The African Development Bank says more like 3.2. And when you look at this, in addition to the oil outputs, when you look at this in addition to the problems in the oil sector more generally, and the administration that has come about as new firms, new government-owned enterprises, through the Petroleum Industry Act are on ground and are struggling to find their way around. It would be obvious, to say that the fuel scarcity will have some significant impact. However, for those of us who live in Lagos, I've seen a bit of a reduction in queues, in the length of queues. I think sellers, retailers are beginning to release some of the stash that they had kept or they had withheld that caused the queues in the first place. But this will still speak to our ability to manage the petroleum supply chain, which again will be affected by the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And China is having a resurgence in COVID, and that will spell very, very serious impact on the world economy. Someone once said, when China coughs, the rest of the world, catches a flu. And I think this would likely be the case for 2023 in Nigeria.
Well, let's talk about, there are issues with subsidy and, of course, forex policies as well. So this one is, with respect to the incoming administration. Litigations, we expect a full litigation season in Nigeria. And maybe at the end of the day, we should have a Nigerian president being sworn in May 29. But this is a big issue at hand. The issue of forex policy, which, of course, is a crisis before now, and, of course, the issue of subsidy removal. So these are two key issues that the incoming administration needs to address. So how possible do you think the coming administration will be able to address these issues on ground? Should they have the president sworn in May 29? So I think we'll wrap up on that note.
Great question, Frank. I think it's been a long time coming, and these questions, specifically subsidy, are not linear, because you have different tiers of government generally affected.
Okay, I think again we have the distortion there, like a disconnection, audio disconnection there. But if you can hear me, so I would like to really hear what you will say, because these are two, problems or challenges, economic challenges that the incoming, administration will have to inherit. If, of course, coming into office and then inheriting such a huge, challenges, forex policy and subsidy. it's really, really going to be a burden. Talk to us. I'll land you there.
The current president-elect was a participant in the subsidy removal protests of, I think, 2011. So it's likely that if Bola Tinubu is sworn in, he may possibly, go about ending.
Okay, so what we're going to do quickly is to see how you can, tidy up that, conversation, and we can wrap up in 30 seconds. Can you do that? Mr. Akwaga, can you hear me? So I wanted to hear what, Vayala will have to say about that so that we can wrap up on that note. But if you can hear me, I really love, to hear what you have to say. If you can do that in about 30 seconds so that we can wrap up. Are you there?
I don't know if you can hear me. Maybe I'll just conserve my bandwidth by putting off my video.
Okay. Yes, I can hear you now. Please go ahead. So I was saying that I need to hear what you have to say so that we can wrap up on that note.
Yes. So it's likely that the incoming government will end the subsidy, specifically because this current budget has made no provisions for subsidy for the next half year. That's from, I think, July to December. So the new government will be forced to decide whether or not it has enough money to go ahead with continuing subsidy. So I foresee a removal of the subsidy nonetheless. For Forex, I mean, these are problems that have been with us for years. We have an overvalued Naira, and the central bank continues to create an artificial value by pegging the Naira at a specific number, about 400 and something Naira, which is, as at December 2022, was half of what the market was willing to pay. So unless the central bank is able to untie or unpeg, the Naira from that artificial value, we will continue to have Forex problems. And then, this is, again, with the backdrop of an unproductive economy that really has not allowed us to amass enough Forex in the first place.
Okay. Well, I think we'll have to just leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Vayala Kwaga, Senior Analyst at Budget Foundation. We appreciate you for coming on board again.
Thank you for having me, Frank, as always.
Yeah. Have a great day ahead.
You too.